Get some Padres comments in here. This is from Steve. He says the Padres look terrible. Their stars aren't hitting. What will Preller do?
He's going to try to make a trade to get pitching. I happen to like the in-depth coverage that the UT provides of Kevin Acee and Jeff Sanders, and they play devil's advocate, and they write from their sources what they hear, and we talk about from my sources what I hear. They're going to have to make a deal to get pitching. They don't have enough pitching right now. Nobody knows the outcome of Darvish, and we're holding our breath because Musgrove, although he's throwing a bullpen session now, he's just throwing 15 pitches at 80%. Whoomp. He's not throwing any breaking stuff. He's not throwing game time velocity. So this is a long process. And he's going to have to throw some rehab starts in the minor leagues. So starters 1, starters 2 aren't there. Dylan Cease was just magical. And it looks like they uncovered a mechanical flaw. I mean, he came back and struck out 11, and I think he gave up 1 hit in his weekend start. But Vasquez is Vasquez, and I don't think you can trust him. And then the bullpen gets overused, and they're going to have to find a way to get a pitcher. The pitcher I want is Cal Quantrill from Colorado because I think he's more trustworthy. But I think there's a deal, at least one deal coming. The other question is, do they have any resources to be able to get somebody's relief pitching? Because they think they need somebody to help Suarez.
Well, looking at the Padres from a hitting perspective, you get Xander Bogaerts back. He looked pretty good, yep, in his at bats. So now who's the odd man out in the infield? It's probably Donovan Solano. He's not a bad trade chip. I mean, that dude can hit. He's hitting over 280 last I checked.
Yeah, but you're not going to get Quantrill for Solano. If that were the case, Colorado, which had enough players, would have signed Solano when he was on the street.
Sure.
So that maybe is a throw-in. Only time will tell as to what they can afford to pay and what they're going to get back in return. And then the other intangible, the guys up the highway, the Dodgers, they're going to make a deal. They may be going after the same, Quantrill at Dodger Stadium with those bats. And they've got the resources, and they don't have a problem taking on additional luxury tax payment salary. Interesting. Okay, Steve, thanks for joining us. Next topic.
Okay, let's go here to Dan, and he says, the Judases are a 6-11 team at best.
He is making reference to the Chargers. At this point, I don't even know that I could pick the schedule and tell you how many they're going to win, because there's too many questions that have to be answered. I do think offensive line's going to be better. I happen to think moving Trey Pipkins inside the offensive guard, because his big problem was when he had right tackle, had to go out on the edge, and his mechanics, his feet he couldn't get him set because he's a big, thick guy. And he just could not hold up when he had to go out on the edge, and he get knocked backwards, etc. Inside a guard, this is his 3 square feet. That's all he's blocking, whether it's run block and he's a power guy, or whether it's pass block, it's 3 square feet. He's not going out to have to go get Max Crosby or the Raiders out there on the periphery. So I think they'll be better in that front. Does Gus Edwards hold up? What are you going to do about the young wide receivers? Or is it going to be pass catches by committee? I just think there's too many questions right now to indicate what kind of season they're going to have. And I think they got massive issues inside defensively, and have had those issues for like 3 or 4 years in a row. I mean, there's no doubt that Bosa, Kilomac, the kid from Southern Cal, Tuia Pelotu, that those guys are really active. And there's no doubt that an old dog like Denzel Perryman coming back, who had been here early years of his career, he's going to help. And we'll find out how good Minter, the new coordinator, is in terms of putting people in right situations, and what are they going to run, and is it going to work? So to me, there's an awful lot of questions. It's way too early to say what they're going to be. When we get to the end of August, we'll have a much better indication. To me, the Chargers, they got Harbaugh and his resume, and they got Justin Herbert, and they got a lot of questions.
Yeah, a lot. And 6-11 doesn't sound unreasonable. But let's go back to when Harbaugh was hired by the 49ers. Because I remember he had Alex Smith, and then they brought in Colin Kaepernick, and then it turned out to be great for a little while. But was Harbaugh successful in year 1 with the Niners?
Yeah, I think he was. And I think he wound up being 13-3.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So and he was successful at Stanford, and that was not a program that had a lot of resources nor a long track record. I mean, John Elway at Stanford was 1,000 years ago. And he did a great job there, and he went in and he fixed Michigan. But again, he had a lot of blue chip players. He's a lot of number one draft picks at Michigan. He only gets one number one pick here. So it's going to be fun watching to see what the quote Judases do. Next question.
I love the Nick Canepa gloss.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go here to Casey. He says Dodgers need a closer and another reliever to help the pen, and probably going to need another starter for the rotation if they're going to go far in the postseason.
Well, you got to get people back healthy, and that's what they're crossing their fingers on. Has not happened yet. Evan Phillips is really good, the closer, but he's been hurt. He's been on the DL twice already this season. And I was kind of stunned that they used him in the 6th inning of a game in Detroit. That monstrosity where they wound up losing 11-9. They had a 9-4 lead and they lost 11-9 the bullpen. So they got pitching depth issues, but I think they're going to make a trade for a starter. I'm not sure which starter it's going to be, but Andrew Friedman historically has always done significant player acquisitions with big salary contracts at the trade deadline. So maybe there's another one coming. And the guys at the bottom of the batting order are starting to hit, not with regularity, but Gavin Lux is starting to play like Gavin Lux used to play. And then we'll just see if Chris Taylor and some of these other guys come around.
Chris Taylor's had a really weird year.
Yeah.
He's usually very productive. But let's kind of have wishful thinking here. Let's say Kershaw comes back. Let's assume that he's solid. Let's say wishful thinking, Buehler comes back and he's going to be maybe okay. And then you've got Paxton
and Yamamoto.
Who
has thrown a ball for the first time just on the weekend. First time. But throwing soft toss in the outfield, it's a hell of a lot different than being on the mound at Dodger Stadium. So that's a project that maybe September 1st if there's no setbacks with Yamamoto.
So I wonder if Friedman might say, we're not going to trade for a big arm. Maybe we'll trade for relievers, but we're going to kind of hope that our starters come back.
Well, they're hanging on to first place because the Padres are so inconsistent, and the Padres have their own set of injury issues. I mean, they're still, 7 games ahead, and everybody's got games in hands on the Padres because the Padres have played so many games that go in 50 and 49. I mean, it's going to be a challenge to make up that amount of games in the standings. Now, maybe we're just building a roster to hope you can get to the wild card race, but that's no guarantee you're going to win. I mean, the Padres are playing 500 baseball. They're hot and cold. What makes you think in a 3-game series you're going to win them and move on to the second round?
You don't know. Like you say, it's Jekyll and Hyde, and we start to feel optimistic, and then we get frustrated and disappointed again, and it's an emotional roller coaster.
2 weeks, more trades. They're good. They're going to start falling pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Let's go to Steve here. Another Chargers question. I'm curious how the Chargers can be good with no established receivers. That's very hopeful thinking.
Well, if they're going to pound the football and they're going to run it more than throw it, then the pressure on the wide receivers is a little bit different. Still got to catch the ball. You still want yards after the catch. But if they're going to be a ball control team and then let Herbert pick and choose select plays, I like Josh Palmer. I think he's grown a lot. He's been dinged a little bit, but he's 6'5" and he's a tough guy. I don't know what to make of Quentin Johnston because he dropped as many balls last year as a rookie here as he did in his last year at TCU. But boy, is he gifted. He is so big and he's such a long strider and he can beat coverage, but you got to hold on to the football. So, those are the 2 marquee guys right now. Everybody that I've canvassed in college football in the South says Ladd McConkey's quite a player. He's a kid out of Georgia, was a second-round pick. And he's a tough guy, and he can run that inside slot stuff, and he gets open, and there's yards after catch with him. Now, he hasn't done it here, and he hasn't done it against fast inside cover corner slot cornerbacks. So that's just going to be a learning curve process and procedure for him. DJ Chalk, now he's been dinged up, but when he was in Carolina and healthy, he was averaging like 16 yards a catch, deep down the field threat. So they got a mixed bag of guys. There is no Pro Bowler. There is no Mike Williams or Keenan Allen that scared the holy hell out of cornerbacks. So, but if they're running the football and moving the football on the ground with the 2 or 3 running backs they've got, then maybe the pressure on the wide receivers to be stars won't be as great.
Yeah, I forget about McConkey. And you're right. He's legit. Now, this is kind of a crazy question, but going back, looking at all of Charger history and everything that you know about this team, who do you think are the 2 best wide receivers in the history of the team?
Well, people will tell you John Jefferson, for the short time he was here. Wes Chandler was absolutely brilliant. Charlie Joyner was a very different type of receiver who caught an absolute ton of balls. Now, way back, old-time Charger fans, American Football League days, will tell you Lance Allworth. But that was such a different era, and that was so long ago. Modern-day Chargers, I mean, there's no doubt that Phillip Rivers had people to throw to, but he also had LaDainian Tomlinson and the brilliance of Antonio Gates, like Fouts had the brilliance of Kellen Winslow. So, but I think those historically are the greatest players. Keenan Allen was a great route runner. He didn't terrorize people except the fact he's going to run precise things, and you have to defend precise things. And I mean, Keenan Allen will, I think, probably deserves to be in the Chargers Hall of Fame once he retires. Mike Williams was big, and he didn't quite duplicate consistency that he had at Clemson, but he was hurt a lot. But he was still a really good yardage receiver down the field. He just wasn't, he didn't play 16 or 17 games every year because he kept getting dinged because he kept taking hits. But I would say the Air Coryell era wide receivers are probably collectively the best. And the back in the day AFL Charger wide receivers, obviously led by Lance Allworth in the I guess the John Hadel era way back in the 60s. But man, that's a lot of third downs ago.
It is. And you didn't mention Tony Martin, who was there in the 90s.
But that was for a brief period of time.
Remember back, it was probably after the Super Bowl era, and the Chargers signed David Boston. Yeah. We all thought this guy's going to be a stud. He's going to be a great. And that guy was like a head case. He was like Milton Bradley of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he's from Ohio State, and his dad played in the league, and it was a great physical specimen. But there was just too much stuff going on with him, and you couldn't trust him, and missed practices, and they finally said no mas. They got rid of him. Next question.
Okay, let's go here to Callan. He says, Lee, you might know this better than me, even though I've announced in minor league hockey for nearly a decade. How exactly does the entry-level contract, ELC, actually work?
It's part of the collective bargaining agreement. Every rookie who gets drafted can be signed to it's a 3-year minimum deal. It's called entry-level contract. And it's like a 2-way deal. He gets so much if he's in the minor leagues. He gets the bare minimum if he's a first-year NHL player. I think the NHL minimum for first-year players, because of the union agreement, is $725,000. If you play in the minor leagues, if you played in the East Coast Hockey League, you might get a contract that's maybe $75,000. In the American Hockey League, which is the top AAA league, if you will, the AHL guys can get anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. But the higher priced AHL contracts are really few and far between. But it is all structured by the collective bargaining agreement, and in essence, it's a 2-year contract.
It sounds like the NBA 2-way deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Callum, good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I agree. Okay, let's go here to Chris. And he says, huge trade rumor. I'm hearing the Dodgers about to get Kevin Gossman and Bo Bichette from Toronto for a package centered around 2 hot kid arms, Dalton Rushing and Dave Roberts.
Well, Dalton Rushing possibly, and there's a young catcher that stalled at AA by the name of Diego Cartaya. And he's had a bounce-back season, had a miserable season last year. He's had injuries. There are rumors everywhere that they're going to blow Toronto up. In fact, there's rumors everywhere they're going to blow Ross Atkins, the general manager, out. And the manager might get fired too. But that would be taken on salary, but that would be a typical contract that Andrew Friedman would make. And Gaussman, who used to pitch for the Giants and actually was a pretty competitive veteran, was in Baltimore, I think, before that, and maybe even Texas or Detroit. But Gaussman's the type of guy the Dodgers would get, who'd be plug-in, doesn't have injury problems, takes the ball every 4th or 5th day. Bichette's had a tough season. I actually think he's on the disabled list right now. His numbers are not what they were. And if that happens, then it leads to the next question. Are they going to trade Vlad Guerrero? Because his name has also been mentioned out there. I find it hard to believe Toronto would trade Vlad to the Yankees. You're going to trade with the enemy in the division, unless the Yankees just give you a volume of young prospects. So, connecting the dots, that makes sense that maybe Gaussman is the type of guy they'd go after because they can afford to make this deal because they got so many other guys in the farm system.
He was good with the Giants,
Yes.
for about a 2 or 3 year stretch. But isn't it amazing how Toronto Blue Jays, we thought that they
Oh,
had all these kids and they're all the sons of ex-major leaguers and they were going to just run roughshod over the AL East, and they just keep struggling.
yeah. I mean, they got Vlad Guerrero, Biggio, Kevin Biggio,
Well,
who's
he's with the
Dodgers now,
Yeah.
Bo Bichette. And then they spent a lot of money on George Springer, who I was surprised left Houston to go there. But they've had a lot of injuries to their pitchers, and then you got pitching injuries, and then guys who just are not performing everyday lineup, and guys who get dinged, and just it's not a good season in Toronto. And I mean, they are holding Ross Atkins, the general manager, responsible. I'm not even sure that he's going to survive when we get to the offseason.
Every major league team's got injuries, guys underperforming, contract problems, holes in their roster. This is going to be a dynamic 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's going to be a lot of wheeling dealing at trade deadline. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, let's go to Greg. He says, Lee, is there a group out there trying to bring the NFL back to San Diego?
No, because there's no stadium. There's no site for a stadium. One of the biggest disappointments I had was A, the Chargers left and screwed everybody along the way. B, we had a proposal. It was called the Soccer City proposal, in which Soccer City was going to build a soccer stadium and go get an MLS team, and then maybe allow San Diego State to move in. And after 5 years, Soccer City was going to give the soccer stadium to San Diego State and let them operate it. But part of the Soccer City proposal was they had a 15-acre tract of land that they were going to reserve if somebody wanted to come in and build an NFL stadium and try to get an expansion team or lure somebody, it'd be there. Well, that proposal from Soccer City got voted down. San Diego State's proposal wound up winning. San Diego State took over the entire 143 acres of the Qualcomm site, and the availability of that land for a stadium's gone, because that's going to be a park or a river park, or it's going to be academic buildings, going to be research center, dormitories. That's the long-range vision of what Qualcomm has become. So there's no land available immediately. And you can say, well, rich man, he can go buy the land. Well, if the rich man's going to buy the land, say they're going to buy land up in Oceanside, because that was floated out there as a locale. You're going to have to spend the money there. You have to spend enormous money to build a stadium. And then you're going to spend money for an expansion team? Where's all that money going to come? I mean, outside of Jeff Bezos, I don't know very many people that have that kind of wealth to do all three of those things that need to happen. So I think, sadly, I don't think we're ever going to see the NFL back here, at least in our modern lifetime.
I agree with you. But has the NFL, are there whispers of expansion?
No, but you have to know that there's an enormous amount of money out there to be made as an expansion franchise. You just have to pick the right markets. And I'm not outside of San Diego. I don't know what other right markets are out there. Hell, you're not going to Fargo, North Dakota. I guarantee you that.
Well, maybe it's like some of these international locales.
Well, that's been talked about. I mean, they are talking London expansion franchise. They are talking Mexico City expansion franchise, but I think that's down the road. I don't think that's in the immediate near future in the league.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to Angel. He says, All-Star break couldn't come at a better time for both the Dodgers and Padres. As for the Angels, they've been a surprise team. I was sure they'd be 33-65 at the break.
Yeah, I think they have 41 wins. I don't know how Ron Washington got this roster to 41 wins. I think the record's 41-56, something like that. They just don't have enough players right now. But, I mean, they have developed some guys that you really like. I think Zach Neto, the shortstop's really become a fan favorite. Logan O'Hoppe, a little bit of pop in that bat, not hitting for great average. He's the catcher. He's played very well. There are people calling the Halos about trades. There is a lot of conversation about Taylor Ward, the left fielder, possibly being moved. They were shopping Joe Adell. He's got some power. He's not hitting for average at all. And this is really deep into his career. I think the shocking thing, I read a piece, 3 years ago, 2021, they drafted 21 pitchers. All 21 of the draft picks were pitchers.
I remember that.
Only 2 of them have gotten to the major leagues, and both of them got hurt.
Really?
Yeah. Chase Silseth is one. He's the only one that got there. He got hurt. The other one got here and was never healthy. They traded a group of them away. I think there's 9 of them still left from the 21, but they're all buried in the Angels farm system. None of them are viewed as major league pitchers. So, I mean, when you spend all those picks on arms and hardly anybody gets there, not good. And that's why they're in the mess they're in right now.
Well, that goes to player development and their coaching system and everything else.
And that spins then back to Artie Moreno and philosophy.
Yeah, and resources and where you invest. But Ron Washington has done a great job there with the Angels. But remember, he was a consideration for the Padre job.
Mm-hmm.
The Padres hired Schild. I mean, just imagine for a moment that Ron Washington was the manager of the Padres. Do you think the Padres would be better or worse than they are?
His ability to communicate with the players and teach players. But he, as much as he may have input in developing the players still got to do it at home plate. And the veterans, these are the guys who have not really had great seasons and not hitting. So I don't know if he would have made a big difference. I think the big issue is that Washington had off the field problems, and Padres, AJ Preller just does not get involved with guys who've got off the field issues. And I think indirectly that's the reason why Ron Washington was not hired in San Diego. And I like Schilt. I think he runs the clubhouse. He's got strong philosophies. He makes too many excuses to me because he never holds anybody publicly accountable. But again, the players in the batter's box and players on the mound are the ones that have to perform. And in part, that goes back to the general manager. Who did you give me, and how come they're not playing well?
Well, I like Schilt. I like him a lot. Here's another comment, also Padre Dodger related, from Richard. With the Dodgers having unlimited resources, what could AJ offer at the deadline? No farm system capital to work with.
Well, he's got farm system capital, but the ownership has said we're not trading any of these young players. And they're making reference to the top 2 pitchers in the organization are really struggling, Richard. DJ Lasco, who was coming off elbow surgery as a high school pitcher, he's not pitching well. Rob Snelling is just stalled at Double-A. He's not pitching well. Those are the 2 arms. The third player is Ethan Salas, who's hitting under 200 at Class A ball, but he's only 18. And the fourth player is a kid here up at Lake Elsinore, Leonardo DeVries, who's pushed his batting average a little bit over 200 right now, but he's really young too. I think he's 17. So, I mean, the Padres' philosophy is push them out there, force them to play a little bit above their heads, see how they cope with it, etc. And the ownership has said, well, stop trading. I mean, he's traded half the blue chips in this farm system already for the transactions that he made to get Luis Arise, etc. So I don't think they've got a lot of resources to give unless you're going to part ways with Hassan Kim. And Kim can be a walk free agent, and they've got a lot of shortstops in the organization and the system. Maybe you trade Kim, maybe you trade Campusano, because he has shown flashes that he can hit, and he's a kind of a workhorse behind home plate, although he's not an established everyday major league pitcher. Maybe you trade major league catcher, maybe you trade the catcher. So AJ's kind of limited, and AJ's limited by the luxury tax. They've told him you're not going over the threshold or getting near the threshold. So that limits whether he could take on a big salary. I do think they're going to make a deal. I'd like to see him get Quantrill because they'd own his rights for 2 more years. But again, Colorado is not going to make the Padres better just to make them better. Colorado is going to want to extract something from San Diego.
Well, there's definitely a game of musical chairs going on in the infield and the DH spot. And they got one guy that doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. Trading Kim would make all those pieces work, but he's not the end of a deal. He's going to be a free agent. I don't know if that makes sense. But the Padres, they've got their starters, but we don't know what to expect from them. There's no guy like in AAA or AA that's you think is waiting for his opportunity.
Yeah. I thought if Snelling had another good year, and he was pretty good last year going from A to AA, I thought, okay, he's going to arrive here, but he's not going to arrive here now. He's 2-8 with an ERA of over 7. So, I mean, he's just kind of hit a wall where he is, and you just have to work through that. And young guys get overwhelmed, and you got to work through that and make them more complete ball players. But so the Padres, they've got some limitations here. I don't know where it's going to go. All I know is we're 2 weeks out, and if you're scuffling and struggling, you'd rather make the best trade you can now. If you can get 2 or 3 starts out of the next guy you're bringing into your rotation, rather than wait till July 31st, maybe you're better to do that. I do think the Dodgers, this is interesting because they played so badly and they have so many pitching problems. I think the Dodgers are going to be the first ones to dive in and make a deal because they got the assets to do that.
They do.
Okay.
They're loaded.
Go. A couple more here.
Okay. Let's go to David. talking a little soccer. He says they need to do a better job about the conditions of the pitch used for the World Cup. It was bad for Copa America and possibly caused Messi's injury. They put sod over the artificial turf.
Yeah, it was a real problem. And then they watered the sod, and it was really, the players were skidding. And that, that's how you get hamstrings. Or in Messi's case, he didn't get hit. Now, he got kicked prior. He got killed prior. Just terrible way Colombia plays. I mean, spikes up all the time.
Yeah.
And so he went down with an ankle injury. He was down for almost 5 minutes. They played shorthanded as they administered to him off the field. And they went back on, and when he was running, his foot slipped. And he'd already had ankle problems even all the way back with Miami and MLS. And he went right down, and he was in just enormous, enormous pain. So, Copa's taken a lot of crap. Field conditions in some of the locales, and the whole ticket distribution thing, and security, at least in the Miami scenario. It was fascinating, though, because they were drawing 70 to 80,000 in some of these venues for the games. I mean, soccer in America, to me, has really, really arrived.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I think it's great, considering that it's an international sport. I think it's fantastic. Now, the stadium where they played in Miami, that's where the Dolphins play.
Yeah,
right?
Hard Rock
Stadium. Okay. So that's why they had, I guess, the turf underneath. That's what they normally
Yes.
use there. Interesting. But yeah, I saw the field, and I remember seeing the sprinklers at halftime. And it's interesting when on television, it's hard to tell, but the field was so perfectly manicured, and every time they fell, they had shards of grass all over them, so they must just done the lawn mowing the thing. But I'm just amazed that they keep it in such great condition. But to David's point, there were cases where there were divots.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of problems, and that's what took out Messi. Yeah,
and they said the field was really slick, which meant they watered it a lot. Now, granted, it's not an open roof stadium; it's a hole in the roof stadium. But it was hot and it was humid, and then they watered the hell out of it. And the footing, the players are going down the whole night. So they've got between now and 2026 on different venues to figure this thing out for the World Cup.
But that'll be World Cup people, not Copa America people, right? Now, the stadium where Lionel Messi plays in the MLS is a different stadium,
yes,
right?
That's an MLS-built stadium by David Beckham. They built that a couple of years ago.
So that's what, maybe like 30,000 capacity, something like that.
All right, next question. Let's go to social media.
Yeah, let's do social media. We got a bunch of guys here in line. How about F1? Let's talk F1. And this is from Peter. He says, that race was lost by stupidity more than won by greatness. At the end, it was only 1.4 seconds splitting them.
Oh, he's talking about Lewis Hamilton upsetting Max Verstappen at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. We had talked about this last week. But the fact that Hamilton was able to be running in the top 4 or 5 with a car that's not produced all season long is amazing. Now, Verstappen has had accidents. Verstappen's had screw-ups in the pits. Hamilton, right place, right time, and he wound up posting the victory. If they had to go 2 or 3 more laps, maybe somebody would have caught him. But it is interesting. It's a first win since 2021 for Sir Lewis. And, of course, he's going to leave Mercedes here at the end of the season to go to Ferrari in a very controversial move. But it's really interesting to see how Verstappen right now is being viewed as almost the enemy. Like, all of a sudden, nobody likes him. And he's dominated the sport for the better part of 2 years with Team Red Bull. And, there's insinuations that maybe they should part ways with this guy. So I don't know if the guy's ego has gotten totally out of hand. He's had so many incidents the second half of the season. He's not dominating the races anymore. So interesting to see where it goes in F1. But, for Sir Lewis, nobody expected. I don't know anybody, myself included, and I follow F1, expected Hamilton was going to do anything before he reached the end of the road with Mercedes and he left to go to Ferrari.
Verstappen was winning too damn much.
He was running all the races.
Yeah, so it's nice to see a little change of the guard, but it's really the old guy that's back with Lewis Hamilton. But this is kind of a crazy question. But I remember as a kid back in the 70s or so, there were F1 cars that had 4 wheels in the front and 2 in the back. Have you ever seen those before? Like Elf Racing? Does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay, I got to go look that up.
Sure, you weren't drunk when you thought about that?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe I was a little kid. I was probably paying too much attention to my slot car racing trip.
But no, that's a reach. I've never, ever heard that one. But F1 has grown. It is so expensive to operate. What they charge for a city to host is absolutely phenomenal, but it's grown. I mean, from a network perspective, it is must-see TV, especially in the European venues, which is why now they're pushing to come here to the States. And, they in soccer are trying to make an impact here in the US. And now we're going to be up to 3 F1 races. And the goal within a couple of years is to have 5 events here in the States, in addition to the one they have in the Canadian Grand Prix. It was in Montreal. So this sport has just exploded, and their personalities. And it's really just a very, very different sport now than it was 5 years ago, and really different than it was 10 or 20 years ago. And it was great back then.
Hey, well, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Can we get one more question here? Because
Okay.
this is about the home run derby, which is going to happen tonight. And this is from Do You Love It? He says, I hate how they turn the home run derby into this rapid fire thing. The crowd used to be able to admire each long ball hit, and now the next pitch is thrown before the last one even lands, and the hitters are out of breath. Let the big boys go out there and launch some for the fans and keep it to 2 rounds. And P.S., ditch the hideous uniforms. Let them wear their own unis.
Here. Let the home team wear their home jerseys in whites, so we get to see all the colors. Let the road teams wear their road grays with their own logos. I think that would be cool. They've invoked new rules. A lot of the guys who've been in the Derby are not in the Derby this year. The injury factor is obviously one, and they've changed the rules. And it's not going to be head-to-head competition. I go up and I take my swings, and then the next batter, John Riley, goes up. He takes his swings, and the third batter, our dog, who is our mascot takes his swings, and then they'll just take the top 4 guys, and then they'll advance, and there'll be semifinals. And also, they're ratcheting down the pitches, how many pitches you can swing at. They're going to give these guys a chance to stand in the box, catch their breath before the next ball. No, do is absolutely correct. It just became rhythmic. Throw it, hit it. And, I'm a player. I'm a manager, a general manager of a team who's got my star player in home run derby. I don't want my guy to suffer an oblique injury because he's trying to do too much. So this one's going to be ratcheted down and handled a little bit differently.
I love that the polar bear, Pete Alonso, this is a big deal for him, and he makes it a big deal. That's exciting. And then I also go back to remembering when the All-Star game was here in San Diego, and Will Myers had his brother pitch to him, and he got beamed by one of the balls. It was typical Padres, right?
Yeah. But who's not there? Obviously, Ohtani, and he leads baseball in home runs, and Soto's not there. When you talked about the All-Star game in San Diego, I sat down the left field line by the Western Metals building, and I watched. At that point, he was called Mike Stanton, Miami Marlins, just crush home run after home run. It was just phenomenal. But again, the throwing grapefruit's up there, and he had a good guy pitching, and he just kept hitting bombs. It was great for the fans. But if I'm the general manager of my team, I don't want Manny Machado to suffer rib cage or an oblique injury trying to win home run derby. And that's a big issue, and that's why they changed the rules.
Remember Josh Hamilton?
Sure.
That was a fantastic display in the home run derby. Probably my favorite one ever.
So is it a gimmick? Yeah. Have they found something? Yeah. It's cool. Now they need to structure it for the safety of the players and still make it a great event for the fans. Good question. Hey, thank you for being with us. We hope